Excellent. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Welcome to our security best practices, how to make collaboration work in 2020. It's a webinar that was organized by Jair, who is our head of security, and I'm co-hosting with him. My name is Anibal Abarca, and I'm the CTO at Wizeline. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Jair, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello everyone. As Anibal mentioned, I am Jair Sandoval, the security lead at Wizeline, and welcome to the webinar.
I want to start with a little bit of an introduction about Wizeline. I would like to talk about who we are, what we do as a company, and how we organize our team, or how do we think about our team. And then Jair will walk you through what we prepare, and it's a bit summary of how we were preparing, or the way we prepare for potential crisis and any eventuality or issue that we might face. And then how do we recommend and envision other companies to get prepared and to improve their resilience, or to become a more secure organization and a better and better prepared for any circumstance that could come in the future, like the one that we are experiencing now. So Wizeline, we are a technology company. We started as a product company about 6 years ago, and we're a software development company that is specialized on design and technology. We have operations in the US, in Mexico, in Vietnam, in Spain, Australia, and in many cities in these countries. We are a distributed team, although we are regularly, and before the lockdown that we are facing right now, we were mainly co-located as a team. Although we have been working as a remote team for our customers for these past 6 years, we're very well, I would say, prepared and also used to work remotely. We were not necessarily working from home, but as a team, we were ready to work remote because our customers most of them are in different countries. And even when we're working with customers that are in the same city and in the same country, most of our teams are working in our offices. We are a very diverse organization, focus on technology, focus on design, on data capabilities, and we have had the lucky to bring and attract great talent, world-class talent to our company. So we have to be in a very in a very diverse, a very dynamic organization because of the nature of our business, not only because our customers are in different countries and come from different cultures, but because we are also a very diverse organization from different cultures, from different backgrounds, and even from different languages that we speak at the offices and at the company. And we are focused as a company. We are very focused. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I'm gonna continue from here. Sorry.
I am so sorry. My kids are at home. Bear with us. I'm so sorry. We're experiencing a lot of issues, as you can say, as working from home, mainly on these kind of situations. But we are a product mindset company, and because we started working building products, and also because we take care of the business outcomes, and because we take ownership of how we are working and the business outcomes of the products that we're developing. And the other part is that we're an engineering-centric organization, and I believe that what that makes us is that we focus on building solutions. We're passionate about building solutions. We're passionate about understanding the issues of our customers and working together to design the best technology and the best solution for our customers. So that's about it. Jair, go back to you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Anibal, for this excellent introduction about Wizeline. Well, this is the scope of this webinar. This webinar is mostly about sharing some security best practices and how you can reorganize some of your processes from the strategic perspective of the organization. This is not necessarily about going deep about technical issues or about endpoint security like advice, you know. When we come to the security part at Wizeline, we always need to take care about three main branches. And this obviously it's going to depend on the nature of the organization. The three branches, basically the first one is internal operations. We all understand this, which is basically the protection of infrastructure, applications, and endpoint security. Also, the protection of the customer, which is basically all the information that they may share with us, but also about what we produce for them. Most of the time, it is this reflected in code, also as security architecture maybe. And finally, we need to take care about the security as consulting services to protect the development pipelines of our engineers. And also when sometimes it is required an additional security service, like for example, performing a pen testing, static code analysis, things like that, which may support like the main service that we provide to the persons. But how have we managed this? This section, the yellow one, is basically about how we did right before even the pandemic started. We all know how the pandemic started. We know that everything started around December of 2019. Since then, the virus, the COVID-19, has been spreading globally, resulting in the actual coronavirus pandemic. What does this mean from the business perspective? Most of us, we started to hear gossips by the start of the year. And some of the questions that I received when we come to the business continuity strategy is when we should start to preparing for the contingency. It was a gossip good enough excuse to start to taking some activities to procure business continuity? I will say yes. Most of the times, even a gossip, it will be enough just to start preparing this situation. What does this mean from the perspective of the cybersecurity or of the virtual world? Since the COVID started, we've seen a spike, a huge spike of several cyber attacks. Most of them has been reflected in these four sections that I just mentioned in the slide, which is basically phishing, malware, malicious domains, and ransomware. Why? We know that most of the malicious entities tend to take advantage of the scenarios, of the situations where most of the organizations and even government organizations and hospitals and the people themselves are trying to reorganize all the processes, all the procedures, and all the activities that they perform. So the malicious entities just take advantage of that. We've seen scenarios where, for example, an hospital received the impact of a ransomware where they have encrypted all their information. And of course, the malicious entities try to obtain a ransom, a payment to release that information. And of course, most of the hospitals we may think to pay the ransom because they cannot just afford to stop the operations, right? I think we all have received phishing attacks also across the world time that we've been using technology. Most of the time, the phishing are just emails or calls or other ways where the people or the malicious entities try to impersonate some institutions. We've seen a lot of also a spike of phishings trying to impersonate, like for example, the World Health Organization, the CDC, or local institutions like governments, like saying like, hey, you are going to receive your government support in this COVID crisis. So please click here so we can register your information. And of course, most of the times it's just phishing. They try to obtain information from us, or they try to make us install an application or something in the computers of course, to do a most advanced attack. But here it comes the first advice we can give about business continuity, how we can deal with all this scenario, which is basically hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. This is a phrase that we all have heard across the time. What we must know about this is that preparing for the worst, it actually has a meaning in business slang. In business slang, preparing for the worst is called business continuity and resiliency. When you apply all these principles, you are securing that your strategy and your work environment are procuring to continue the operations when the crisis hits. What does this mean for Wizeline? Why did we start talking about Wizeline and the principles that we follow? Because the first layer of security that we follow for contingency, it was actually the principles that we follow. To have world-class talent, to have product mindset and engineering centric. Why? Because when you have world-class talent, that means that you are looking for the best people. That means that you are going to trust in that people to solve any problems that it presented in front of them. That also means that when you have world-class talent, you can procure and easily encourage ownership, extreme ownership of their processes. That means that when they take charge of their processes, when a scenario or like the COVID appears, they are going to be able to resolve and propose solutions quickly. And they are not going to be expecting a solution or an answer from the top to the bottom. All the answers are going to come from the bottom to the top. This basically is traduced that when you can, that it's always going to be easier to transform a company in smaller blocks rather than a wall. And again, this basically means that you need to trust in the people and you will feel more comfortable if you can have the people with the right mindset taking the ownership of their processes, so you just don't need to take care about all the small pieces and activities to ensure business continuity. But how is this translated in the IT world? When we come to the IT world, we see that traditional infrastructures nowadays relies on the security of main data centers and having everything centralized in one place. Why? Because there is always a huge misconception that having the infrastructure in just one data center and just one place is going to be so much easier to secure, because you just need to protect that place. You can put all the layers of security that you want all around that specific place that you want to protect. But we've seen also that this may not necessarily be true. Centralizing the IT services means most of the times that you are going to have all the services there, and you are going to also have the connectivity services there. Our first advice about this is, and I think that we all come to the same answer when we see the first slide, is infrastructure decentralization. Infrastructure decentralization means to decentralize not only the services, but also the connectivity services, meaning that you should be able to connect from any place of the world to such services in the same way as if you were at the office. What does this mean, and what is the reflection in security environments? Is super easy. This means that you are not going to take care about the security only of one place, data center, but also you must take care about the security of endpoint security, meaning the laptops, the workstation of your users, even the mobile devices, but you must take it with the same seriousness like if you were protecting the data center. And Anibal, can you share some example and some experience how this approach in a real world case, please?
Sure, thanks, Jair. So the example that I'm going to show, this is a high-level architecture and probably very rudimentary way of seeing it, but this is a customer in the financial services industry that used to have their core banking system on a monolithic architecture. It was living on-prem. It was all integrated. I would call it as a monolithic application running on single server, of course, distributed databases, but all the security, administration, the application was all running as a single unit. If we look forward, and not only because they wanted to modernize their platform and to migrate to the cloud, the application looks very different, right? Instead of having a single point of failure, now we have a very robust security strategy, but also we have a distributed application. We start using now microservices. We now use platform as a service and the identity management solution. We have distributed databases and distributed storage as well, using platform as a service. And we kept the strengths and we kept the security with the same strong rules and with the same strong strategy, but now we have a distributed approach that I believe this is a very good translation to what you presented in your diagrams. And this is a way we're helping other companies, but at the same time, when I think about the applications that we are running internally and our own solutions that we have built to run our business, we're following the same approach, and we're using similar services, identity management, different services across the company, different ways to store our data, and even in different workflows. Like, for example, when we develop software, we have as well services that are decentralized, but following a specific and very strong security strategy to help us maintain the resilience and the security in each process, but also to allow us to scale and to respond faster to changes.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Anibal. And just by the way, before continuing, remember that we have the chat open in case that you want to comment something, in case that you have a question. As we move along, we can take a look on it and maybe we can answer that question in that moment. So how does this decentralization translate for security teams? Well, basically, this means that most of the times you need to decentralize also your monitoring tools, break dependencies, or have a lot of consoles that you are reviewing over time. There are already a lot of security suites that you can implement. There are, for example, in the market CIM solutions, which is security, information, and event management tools, or even SOAR solutions, which is security, orchestration, automation, and response tools. All these tools, what they do is to try to centralize all the security alerts in just one point, and most of the times they can also correlate these alerts of different sources, trying to see if there is a more complex or advanced attack that otherwise in just one point you will not detect. Also, the beauty of some of these tools like the SOAR solutions is that these SOAR solutions have most of the times also capabilities not only to detect, but also to take actions to contain, mitigate, and even investigate the incidents. Most of the times, this also means that you can automate the remediation of the incidents that you are receiving. My strongest advice that I will give here is that to always select the right service vendors. What does this mean? Select the right service vendors does not necessarily mean that you need to select the best tool that was suggested that you found in the internet, the best tool that someone suggests you to implement. You always need to look about which tool is going to integrate to your environment. We've been also in situations where the organizations find this like the best solution promised in the internet, but when they try to integrate this with their technologies, you may notice that maybe these integrations cannot be performed because there's no native integrations on the tool. Like just one example, we use one tool which is called Alien Vault. Alien Vault is a same solution from of AT&T. Why did they choose this tool? Again, because this was the one that suited our infrastructure. It has the capabilities to check alerts from AWS, from GCP, from GitHub, from other sources that are so important for our main business. But what does this translate to to a business continuity strategy? When we mention hoping for the best but preparing for the worst, I mentioned it. Preparing for the worst is actually a way to mention that you should have a business continuity plan, a business continuity strategy. What is a business continuity strategy? A business continuity strategy is a plan that documents how you are going to approach the crisis scenario. What do you need to do when the crisis strikes? Business continuity is oriented to help the personnel to take actions and to figure out how they are going to resolve the main problems quickly. And about it, Anibal, do you have any suggestion about how this should be approached from the strategy standpoint and from the top management standpoint?
Yes, of course. And when I think about these processes, it's always important. You wish you won't need those documents, right? So when we thought about what was going to happen at the beginning of the regulations and moving everyone to working from home, we had a lot of conversations with the IT team, with Jair and the security teams. And we were thinking about how to continue our business, how to keep delivering services, how to keep delivering value to our customers, how to keep our team safe, how to make them feel comfortable and confident about their day-to-day job, and how to keep everyone engaged, how to keep everyone motivated and productive, right? So when we thought about, we didn't think about an actual document or an actual artifact. We were thinking about what drives our business. Of course, our people, our customers, our data, our applications. And then we started discussing, okay, we have to move. How are we going to keep our data safe? How are we going to onboard new members to our team? Because we had a lot of people joining in the coming weeks that for the first time, we were going to have remote onboarding sessions, sometimes mail delivery to deliver laptops and keyboards and all the tools. And of course, that's a challenge. So that's the main point is when we think from the executive perspective, when we think about this, it's important to think about what drives our business. And of course, when we work in collaboration and we are very well aligned with our IT teams and with our security teams, this happens almost seamlessly. I don't believe at the executive level, we never saw a document from the team to say, this is our business continuity plan, although we know we have that documentation, but it really happened so smooth that we were able to adapt most of our process very quickly without too much without big disruption and of course mitigating most of our risks.
Yeah, and that is something very important. Most of the times we must think that because there is some compliance rules that says that you must have a business continuity plan, this must be translated always in a specific document. But the best way that you can approach business continuity is when you embed this, as Anibal mentioned, in the culture of the persons. If you can make them know how they can reorganize their functions, their activities, without even going to an actual document to check this. Then we come to the part of DevSecOps. I think, Anibal, you are best suited to talk about how our DevSecOps transformation help us.
Yes, for us, DevSecOps, it's about our culture. And I won't read this. Francesco, one of, the DevOps lead at Wizeline, he presented recently at the DevOps Days in Guadalajara. And this is a result of what we're trying to do and also how we think about our team and how we think about DevOps at Wizeline. We think about DevOps as a way to implement the values that we discussed, right? Like product mindset, ownership, and bringing trust to the teams and across the company. And that results into pushing the decisions to the edge and the decision-making process to the edge of the organization. So that means that everyone in the company has to be thinking about the outcomes, has to be thinking about the value proposition, has to be thinking about our customers. And of course, has to be thinking about our team and those things that drive value in our business, right? So the result of this is that we have left many of these ideas, security, quality, collaboration, and that's the way we think, not only when we are delivering or when we are building software and technology for our customers, but that's the way we are trying to think as a company in general. So I think that this is something that has helped us prepare, is to push these DevSecOps processes, not only in the instrumentation level, but also at the cultural level in the company.
Right. And starting from here about approaching to try to embed everything in the culture, this also means that you need to promote the ownership of the security within the company. You need to try to break that dependency on your security team, where the security team usually is taught that they should be the ones taking care of everything about security. And that is not right. Why? Because it is also the responsibility of the developers and the operations staff and all the administrative staff. Why? Because most of the times they are the ones suited to solve some security issues because they know the environment, they know their own landscapes where they are working on. So always try to trust and leverage the part of the security and push it into the culture of the other areas. Just going to the security team for advice and for support. Now we are talking about what you can do to transform all these environments, all these practices in crisis resistant. We already talked about how we can approach the part of security decentralization. When we think about security and IT services decentralization, the first thing that we come or bring us in mind is to use cloud services. We all know the advantages of using cloud services, like improved mobility and accessibility. You only pay for what you use, and most of them have architectures of high availability, high reliability, and high security, so it aids to disaster recovery. But the biggest question that most of the organizations ask is always, are the cloud services really secure? And the answer is really easy. It depends. It depends on what type of services you are using and what are also your responsibilities when you are using these services. Most of the cloud services nowadays, the cloud service providers nowadays have something called the shared responsibility model. A shared responsibility model basically is a matrix that mentions what are the responsibilities of the users and also what are the responsibilities of the cloud service providers. And here is when most of the incidents occurs, when most of the times the user assumes that the security of certain layer is taken care by the cloud service provider, but at the end it was their responsibility. Like, just to say an example, if we go to the last column, software as a service, and what is an example of software as a service? It may be like, for example, G Suite, if you are using Google Docs or applications like Google Drive. It says that from the application to below, that is going to be the responsibility of the cloud service provider, but about the protection of the data and the protection and the best practices of the people is the user the main responsible. And most of the times, maybe we must think like, hey, it's enough like if I am giving granular permissions to a file through Google Drive to the user. Is that a good security? Well, maybe not. Maybe you need to take care about other additional layers of security to protect that data. There are users who may, for example, encrypt the files before upload them to the drive. Maybe you should also perform periodic reviews of the permissions of the files to see if there are still accesses that you should revoke. A lot of other additional controls you must be maybe approaching, right? One big advice that I could provide here is that always choose the right vendor. And most importantly, assess that vendor. How you can assess that vendor? Maybe you can just trust in the audit reports that they have. Most of the times they may have reports like a SOC 2 report, like an ISO 27 certificate, things like that. But the important here is not just to know that they have these reports and they have these certifications. You need to actually review if what they are providing you, like in the report and in the certificate, is in the scope of the service that you are going to use. Most of the times, ISO 27 certificates are, for example, approaching like the processes that the people follow in that company, but maybe it's not including in the scope the service that you are actually using. So always take care. I mean, you can trust in these reports, you can trust in these certificates, but always take a look in the scope, not just receive blindly this report and these certificates. And this takes me to the next advice that I can grant you, and this is one of the biggest mistakes that also companies take, is always explore the catalog of security features and tools available by the providers. Most of the providers nowadays offer a lot and a huge catalog of services, security features that most of the time you just need to turn on, so they are enabled and they are going to add you an additional layer of security. Like if you check like all these catalogs, you will see that they have for almost everything that you want. Like for example, for identity and access management, for events detection, to secure configurations, to detect attacks, to classify information. They have even data loss prevention systems, or even to protect secrets or keys. I mean, they have most of the time solutions for everything. If you go to major providers like AWS and Google Cloud. So always take a look on that when you are architecturing a new solution, because you may find already that there are solutions for your problems of security there. This takes me to the next point, which is adapt process quickly. Anibal, can you help me? Can you tell me how we approach to adapting processes quickly in the company?
Yes, of course. And I'm looking at a question from Brett, and I'm going to put you both in the spotlight because what we're the next slide, and you can move ahead with the with this concept. It's very relevant, and he asks, how do we ensure security best practices in a continuous deployment and environment? And I guess this relates to how we see continuous change and progress. But before I explain a little bit about that and how is that connected to the practices and the culture that we embrace at Wizeline, Brett is here in the call as well, and together with Jair. Could you share some of your thoughts about that? Brett is part of the staff engineering group, and he's also a certified AWS solutions architect. So what can you share about that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, well, both Jair
sure.
and Brett, you want to share something?
I mean, one thing that I do is I know that for the Node.js environment, at least, it has a tool called npm audit. So if you run that in your continuous integration environment, you can have it fail if it detects some security issues with packages above a certain threshold. That's one thing that I do. But I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, and when we come to try to protect the DevSecOps pipeline, one good advice that I can give is, first, define what are your security requirements in that pipeline. Because if you define first that security requirements, you may be able to detect what kind of tools are you going to use, and even what kind of techniques you are going to use. There are, for example, nowadays techniques about threat detection or threat analysis during your pipeline when you detect like which one are your main pain points, which are your main weaknesses. And then this works like a risk assessment, right? Like where you try to evaluate first your pipeline, you try to evaluate first your application, and then you come with which tools you may use. The second is most of the time you may try to find out ways to adapt the process and to automate everything as much as you can. If you can introduce all these security tools in your pipeline automatically, you have pretty much the work done. Why is important to automate this? Because if you automate all the security tests that you are going to perform, you don't need to take care. You just need to be worried about if you are doing the right job. The tools technically are going to do it for you, and they are going to report. And most of these tools, even in some situations, they may have recommendations of about how you are going to close these, like these vulnerabilities that are found.
Thanks. And we can come back to that question later. But this is a good example because we're always thinking about continuous improvement, continuous change, and we'll try to automate as much as we can, but thinking about not the purpose, not because of the goal is to automate, but because of the goal that we have, which is one is delivering value to the customers, and the second one is to continuously improve. If you go to the next slide, this can happen because of a culture of experimentation and continuous learning. And I believe what we want to achieve is we want to get to a point that our teams think about, okay, what do I want to achieve? What do I have to implement? And how can I analyze the results of what I'm doing and then do it again, right? It's a continuous improvement, continuous experimentation way of running an organization. And this is the approach that we want to take for not only software engineering teams, but any team at the company. And this is something that can be, in many cases, instrumented with the tools, that those that Jair and Brett mentioned.
Right. And throughout all this webinar, we've been talking about how we can introduce or push changes in the culture of the employees. Well, this all reduces always to education. You can take advantage of the scenario of the crisis which is occurring right now, because most of the times there is no better education like adversity, and it's in adversity when we can realize what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. But how you can educate or how you can approach that? One of the biggest mistakes that occurs here is that the security campaigns or any educational campaign that you're pushing most of the times are not necessarily engaging. You know, we all have passed through that scenario where we need to complete a campaign. We need to complete some cases, some activities, some even some campaigns that are really boring, and you just don't want to continue. You just want to finish that campaign. The suggestion here, as I mentioned before, is always keep your audience engaged. And how you can do that? Studying your audience, understand what are the interests of this audience, and create a long-term plan. Why a long-term plan? Because sometimes it may be so much easier to introduce certain concepts in small pieces rather than a wall. Like I mentioned before, sometimes it's easier to change things from small pieces perspective. And customize that campaign based on those interests. Like for example, here you have a poster where you can super quickly understand what is mentioning, what is trying to teach you, and maybe you are going to remember this instead of studying like a whole set of campaigns and capsules in just one time. How we found or how we did it, we basically, for example, we approached something that is interesting for everyone nowadays, which is TV series. We found out about this series, which is called Inside Man. Like it's a cybersecurity campaign. It has 12 episodes, short episodes. The whole first season is like 1 hour length. And how was the reception? Actually, I was very surprised. I will say that by the first time in the history of campaigns, the people wanted more. The people wanted the second season. They wanted to know more about how these security landscapes presented in the series occur. This is not the only way. You may find other ways to try to push that culture. You can, for example, have a champions program where different persons from different areas, they want to engage in security and they want to learn more. You can find trainings, technical trainings. I don't know, there are always several approaches, but the main one is always to try to keep your audience interested. Also, when we talk before and previously about the endpoint security and the decentralization of services, we come to the situation that endpoint security must be something more important than even the security of your data centers. Obviously, that depends on the architecture that you're following. Most of the time we think that endpoint security is just installing the best antivirus, the best firewall, but to be honest, it's not only that. Endpoint security should follow always the same strict rules as you were protecting your most sensitive data or a data center. This translates that you must also follow the same framework that you're using to protect all your other assets to the endpoint security. You need to identify which are the threats that you are having. You need to identify what controls are applicable and then implement all that strategy. Like just to give an example, we are a development company. We produce code. One of the main threats that we have is, like, for example, to protect that code, which most of the times in GitHub and most of the times are, for example, in the endpoint security, in the endpoints, because the programmers or the developers copy the code to the computers. What did we do to approach that? Well, we figured out how to monitor that code in their own computers. We found out that maybe we can modify the Git comments. So every time that they push something to a repository, we see if they are pushing that changes in the proper repository or they are pushing those changes in other repositories that are not of the company. We can even use that to detect, like, for example, if they are going to push a change to the repository, to detect if they are pushing also secrets like AWS keys, like passwords, like things that may be sensitive. And we did that after an analysis to identify that that is our main threat. So we need to find a control to mitigate it. So when we come to endpoint security, always think about the device protection, but also network controls, application controls, data controls, browser protection, and physical protection. But you need to do the analysis, because if you do the analysis, you may come that maybe you have tools that you just don't need. Like, for example, if we have all our environments and applications in the cloud, maybe you don't need something like a data loss prevention system. Maybe you just need to protect from the application in the cloud through the logs, figure out if there are someone leaking information, sharing that information through the cloud application. And this takes me to the last point, which is customize your events alerting systems. In these scenarios, like the COVID situation, we saw that there are new threats. And there are always new threats, even with the COVID or not COVID, there are always going to be new threats. But you must ask yourself if your alerting systems or your applications are being updated as fast as these new threats are raising. If you detect like a new type of phishing in your network or a new type of malware, then figure out how your alerting systems are adapting to that, to those environments, to those threats, and be sure that these are being detected. And ultimately, you try to connect with other entities, like the computer emergency response teams of the government, like security organizations. Whatever can give you more information about these threats is always going to help you to be updated and reflect these changes in your infrastructure. Because these changes must not necessarily always come from outside. Like for example, like the COVID scenario. Maybe there are changes inside your organization that you are now noticing. Like well, group is going to work from home in the next weeks because they are going to be visiting a customer, for example. And you may realize that even small threats like being at home and having children around, that may become a threat. Like maybe the children is going to close to the computer and delete some files that were important for you. So you need to approach that through education and through your technologies. What we've seen in this talk is basically trusting people. Trusting in people may be sometimes difficult, but you need to find the best way to approach that. To promote the ownership, not only of processes, but also of security, business continuity. But giving that trust doesn't mean to leave them alone. Also grant them the education that they may need, also grant them the resources that they may need. Anibal, do you want to talk about the other points?
Yes, of course. The second, of course, we mentioned the decentralization of services, and this is always, I think, or it has to be coupled with a cloud strategy, and then bringing up new services that will help you protect and improve that decentralization as a strategy. And of course, take control over your security. For every company is going to be different. For every company is going to be a different scenario, a different set of tools, a different scale of the team. So it's important to think in that way, to think in how do we embed security as part of our own culture. And to allow everyone to think about the implications of that, and to think about how can individually, how can you impact that? As you mentioned with the Educate campaign that we run at Wizeline, that is a way to allow everyone to take ownership of their own security impact.
Indeed.
And
from the perspective, the last one, as he mentioned, is just to take control over your security. And that means most of the time it's not only having technologies there, detecting and monitoring, but also adapt your strategy as the company and the crisis go on. And answering that question that we have in the chat, like for example, how we can approach like thinking about small businesses that does not have access to all these tools, like the best approach is you can rely on open source projects. There are a lot of super strong open source projects nowadays. And even there are some projects that are a community. Like for example, if you go to a specific vendor, you must see that most of these tools may have a community version, which of course is not going to have all the features, but maybe you can automate all those additional features that you don't have. Or like in our scenario, like for example, the protection of our code. We created a new world tool to detect all these movements in the endpoints that produces and processes the code. So you can rely on that. I mean, maybe with one developer with experience, with expertise in security, you can close all these gaps. We come to the section of Q&A. Please feel free to ask us everything about, and we'll be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Jair, and thanks everyone. I don't know, did you address the question that we have about how a small business can implement security? And I want to add to that. I believe most of our services, like when we think about productivity, when we think running our applications on a cloud, on a public cloud provider, there are out-of-the-box services that are very easy to implement, and probably Red can talk a little bit about that. When I think about us turning on security features on top of the applications on cloud, there are already out-of-the-box services that it's only a matter of turning them on, and it's going to be very, very affordable. And then when we think about productivity applications, like the one we're using right now on Zoom, we actually have a post on our blog that Jair shared where we have some tips on how do you improve security and privacy on tools such as Zoom. Same, there are some features that you can turn on very easily on the productivity providers on Google Suite or Microsoft Office to help you scan emails, identify threats, and I will start from using those two approaches. Make sure that you are using the best, or you are using the tools that you already have in the licenses that you have access to, like Zoom, G Suite, Microsoft Office, and make sure that you are taking also the benefits out of those security and monitoring services that are basically attached to every cloud service. I don't know, Brett and Jair, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. I agree with that. If you trust in those services, which most of the times are not expensive, and implement open source, or even if you want to create things at house, like create your own security features, you can do that. Most of the times it's talked that these super advanced security tools are really super complex, but maybe it's not like that. I mean, like we saw in the example of GitHub security and Git security, we just created a couple of scripts to automate that part of security that apparently it was not approached in other open source source projects that we saw in the internet. So just experiment with tools, experiment with technologies, experiment scripting, and you may find the answer easier than you think. Another question, additional questions? I don't think we have any additional. So thank you so much, everyone. We are going to share the presentation. The presentation has some links or references to good standards and articles. All these are scientific articles. So it may help you to approach security, to have some best practices. And well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.